Well, look at that beautiful glass on that 40-year-old lens. I'm going to introduce the terms aperture, shutter speed and ISO for those wanting to learn some of the technical aspects who have never taken any photos, or those who have been taking photos and want to sort of get onto the technical side a bit more. And this is a 40-year-old camera. Principles still seem to be the same. There's an aperture dial at the front, and there's shutter speed there, and an ISO, which was called ASA in those days. One of the terms that can cause confusion is the aperture, the f-stop, because the numbers are in reverse. For example, the larger aperture, which is that's large, is a small number, and the small aperture, that one, is a large number. For example, that's probably f22 and this is f1.4. So that aperture is what lets in a varying amount of light into the film or the sensor these days. And there's a relationship between aperture, shutter speed and the ISO. We'll talk about that later. So it doesn't really matter what sort of camera one uses. Most of it, the outcome depends on how one takes the photo. Rather than a dial on a camera or on the focus ring, the numbers for the aperture, they're now on a digital display, but they all still have the same meaning. So while there are a lot of controls, the main ones are aperture, shutter speed and ISO, and they're usually in digital form now somewhere on the camera. Notice that the ISO button now is very close to the shutter speed, and it is there for a good reason in the later cameras. So the shutter speed in the old cameras used to go up to about 1,000th of a second. That controls how much light goes into the camera on a time basis, and the aperture is still sort of measured in the same way in f-stops, and there it is on the dial. This one goes from 1.4 to 22. So 22 is the smallest once again, and 1.4 is the largest. The other factor that controls the amount of how we deal with light is the ISO, and that now goes up to thousands. It used to be the old 100 ASA film, and 400 was really fast. That sort of indicates how sensitive to light, or how little light one can use to take the same photo. For example, for the same shutter speed and aperture, if one doubles the ISO, one could then close the aperture down by 1 or half the shutter speed, one of the two. So there's always this intimate relationship. So I'm just introducing the terms now, so we'll be more specific next time round. Enjoy.